Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about the 7 habits of highly effective people, one of the most profound and important, even life-changing books that I have ever read. It's by a man named Steven Covey, and he has brilliantly distilled 7 of the most important, timeless spiritual principles for effectiveness, happiness, and success that are incredibly practical and actionable, and we can begin applying them at any time in our life to create positive change. And although Covey operates primarily in the business sector, this is a book about practical spirituality, different from religion, because spirituality, from my perspective, has a very practical, applicable structure rooted in principles or natural law. At least the kind of spirituality that I'm interested in, because I'm a show me the money person. Talk is cheap. I want results. And I will tell you that if you apply these habits or any one of them to your life, you will get positive results. Because spiritual principles, I have discovered, are very much like the laws of physics or chemistry. There is a non-physical, energetic, vibrational, or spiritual aspect to reality. In fact, many traditions will tell us that on the deepest or highest levels, non-physical reality is really the causal plane. And when we make shifts in our consciousness, in our attitudes and perspectives, and ultimately in our behavior, based on these universal truths, we are aligning with higher consciousness in a very pragmatic way. We are all subject to the laws of gravity, to the rotation of the earth, to the chemistry of our own bodies. Just like aligning ourselves with gravity allows us to walk and ultimately to create incredible machines, aligning our psyches with universal truth or principles allows us to function in highly effective ways and perhaps even become a dynamic, creative force in the world. Principles call us to be functional where we are dysfunctional. And I'm going to spend the next block of episodes going deeper into each of these principles that Covey talks about in the 7 Habits book. But today I'm just going to give an overview. So before I jump into what the 7 habits of highly effective people are, I want to share my own experience of working with these principles. So I don't even remember how I found this book, but I was 33 years old and on the other side of what felt like, honestly, a lifetime of failure to some extent. I was recently divorced. I'd filed bankruptcy. Post-divorce, I had yet another failed relationship. And I had a string of businesses which didn't make any money. And so I ended up cleaning houses to be able to make my rent. I had been housekeeping for a while at this time. In fact, I may have even found this book at the house of a client. So basically, all of my best thinking and effort had come to nothing. And somewhere in the middle of all that process, I discovered Buddhism and Thich Nhat Hanh, the order of interbeing. I went on a 3-week retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh and got to live with the monks and nuns of Plum Village at the University of Vermont, another life-changing experience. And one of the big takeaways from that was that the monks and nuns were, for the most part, very happy. And they had nothing. They didn't even have hair. Love my hair. And one of the things that happens when you come into full nun or monkhood is they shave your head. It's a big ritual, which I have not been a part of, but my understanding was they owned 2 robes, a pair of sandals and a pair of sneakers, and a bowl for eating. They were celibate, although they lived in community, and I was blown away. And I really began to question our cultural teachings about what we need to acquire in order to be happy. And one of the great teachings of Buddhism is that our attachment to people, places, and things and ideas may actually be a cause of suffering. And what we're attached to when we lose it creates more suffering and more desire to get those things again. And so I was open-minded in a way that perhaps only great pain or failure can provide. I'm a big fan of pain and failure. very underrated for our growth because they make us willing and open-minded to new ideas, sometimes radically. And if we've been trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, then maybe what we're trying is faulty rather than just trying harder. So I was diligently practicing mindfulness, being present like we had done on that retreat, staying out of my mental narratives and being in the joy of the present moment. When I was taking a shower, to really feel the water and take a shower. When I was walking, to enjoy my breathing while I was walking. And while I was cleaning houses, which I really came to love, to just enjoy the beauty and the very humble service of making a space clean and beautiful. And so where Buddhism taught me how to be here now, the 7 Habits of Steven Covey showed me a path to go forward. And while living a principle-centered life may not satisfy our desire for instant gratification, it will set our life on a course for progress and fulfillment that has been and remains exciting, invigorating, and deeply satisfying. Principles are like a compass setting, and if you're on a boat in the ocean, your compass setting makes a big difference, even a couple of clicks of where you end up on the other side of the ocean. I might end up in Central Africa, or I might end up in Scandinavia, depending on my compass setting on my voyage. So these 7 habits help us calibrate our compass to align with our deepest dreams, our greatest hopes, and living what I think is our best life. And so the habits are divided into 3 areas: private victory, public victory, and renewal. And the first 3 habits about personal mastery and independence, the private victory ones, are first to be proactive, to take responsibility for our actions and decisions in life, to recognize that we have the power to choose our responses to situations and that those choices create our reality, that we should focus on what we can control, our circle of influence, rather than worrying about what we can't control, which Covey calls our circle of concern. And I'm going to do an entire podcast on each of these principles going forward. So the first habit is self-responsibility and being proactive. It's like the wisdom of the serenity prayer. God or Goddess, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that can take a lot of work. I know, because I used to take a lot of responsibility for stuff that wasn't my responsibility, and I didn't take responsibility for things that actually were my responsibility. And I still often need a lot of help from my advisors and journaling and my spiritual practices to be able to discern what's mine and what's not, what's in my circle of influence. The second habit is to begin with the end in mind, to define a clear vision of what we want to achieve in our life, to identify our values and goals, and then align our actions with our ultimate purpose. This is the drafting of a personal mission statement. And it was probably the first instruction that I received in thinking of my life in its entirety, rather than just what was in front of me or the next 5 years. That I have a life, I'm on a voyage, and I am the captain of this ship. And when I own that power and responsibility, rather than being tossed around by the waves of culture or other people's ideas of who I should be or how I should live, it is quite a potent process to decide where I actually want to go. And we do have that free will. And all great projects need a plan, a vision, a mission, a goal. And developing my own personal mission statement that I still refer to today has been truly life-altering for me. And so this principle of beginning with the end in mind can be used in the micro. What do I want to achieve today or in this 2-hour block of time? Or how do I want to feel on my deathbed about the life I have lived? And the third habit of independence and personal mastery is to put first things first, to prioritize our time and energy on activities that align with these goals and values that we've clarified in number 2. To focus on what's important rather than on what is merely urgent. Covey offers a time management matrix of things that are important and urgent, things that are just important, things that are urgent but not important, and things that are not important at all. I've developed some of my own systems and tools for what I call personal integrity that comes out of this third habit of putting first things first. To clarify what's important to me in my life, and the goal for me is to spend my time in equal measure to the importance of those things, so that my thoughts and my feelings and my actions are all in alignment. This is a way to dissolve inner conflict. And putting first things first is super helpful on the micro, and it is the rudder in the water of that moving ship that's our life. So the next 3 habits are about interdependence, effective relationships, what Covey calls public victory. So first, we have to clean up our own house before we try to change the world. A lot of people have that backwards. And so the 4th habit is to think win-win, to strive for mutually beneficial solutions and interactions. And this mindset builds trust and collaboration. It fosters a relationship where everybody feels valued and satisfied. It's based on the principle of interdependence, which is a much more mature and elevated perspective and position than independence. But independence grows out of dependence. And independence is necessary for most of us before we can grow into interdependence. And so this idea of thinking win-win might seem radical because our culture is very involved in win-lose. I think that's worldwide. And it is a worldview, it is a developmental stage, but it is not the highest truth. That there is absolutely a principle of optimization that provides the highest good for everyone involved. And that has certainly become my daily prayer and a mindset that has evolved me out of a victim circumstance and into places of love and compassion in areas and relationships I would have not thought that to be possible. The 5th habit or principle is to seek first to understand and then to be understood, to practice empathic listening, to truly understand others' perspectives before we express our own. Effective communication begins with understanding, not persuasion. And for me, this is rooted in actual brotherly love, that I can be loving to someone even if I don't like them. The old idea that before you judge a person, walk 10,000 steps in their shoes. And growing in the willingness and capacity to understand others requires us to actually do that. Imagine the life experience of the other person. And I have had some really profound shifts in lifelong resentments and abject hatred because of a willingness to understand another person. That truly everyone is doing the best they can from their perspective, even if it's crap. So the 6th habit is to synergize, to embrace the value of teamwork and diversity, to be willing to combine strengths and perspectives that might be different from your own, and that groups can achieve results greater than the sum of individual efforts. Again, moving into interdependence rather than independence. And each of these habits brings up all kinds of unresolved emotional issues and opportunities to grow. And that's the beauty of principles. They are infinite in their depth and breadth to provide positive, constructive change. And so these are all things we learn to do, learning to be interdependent, learning to value different viewpoints and true diversity. In the natural world, diversity creates a healthy ecosystem and all of the parts work together in often fascinating ways. And the same is true on the human level. When we can open and learn how to synergize and be truly interdependent and the value that brings. And the 7th habit is what Covey calls sharpening the saw, to regularly renew and balance ourselves in the 4 key areas of our life: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. That's why I'm actually revisiting this book almost 30 years later, because it's time for me to resharpen this saw, to look at how I am applying these principles in these areas of my life. Physically, with exercise, rest, and healthy food. mentally with learning and reading and what kind of content I'm consuming, emotionally and socially in my relationships, and my spiritual values and sense of purpose and into being in the world. And so I encourage you to read or listen to The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People if you have not done so recently. But don't just listen to it. Actually apply these principles in your life. To be proactive, to begin with the end in mind, to learn to put first things first, to think win-win, to seek first to understand and then to be understood, and to grow in synergy and interdependence, and to sharpen the saw by revisiting these principles, reviewing them in the different areas of your life on a regular basis. And so I look forward to going deeper into each of these principles over the next 7 episodes. And I hope you'll join me as we apply these timeless principles to our personal and professional lives to become truly captains of our own ship and have a life voyage that is fulfilling, joyful, and satisfying, whatever that means to you. Thank you so much for listening. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.